right. Up next, we have a true patriot and pillar of strength who is also Minnesota's State Assistant Director for Blexit. Truly an honor to have her here today, Miss CC Davis.
All right. Thank you guys for coming out. How you feeling? She's right. I am absolutely a patriot. I am a woman. I'm proud to be a Minnesotan. And I'm here to support you. And I'm here to make sure that Donald Trump serves another 4 years. I'm here as a voice for Black Voices for Minnesota. Black Voices for Trump. I'm also Assistant State Director with Duran for Blexit, Minnesota. You guys, I just want to send a message from Candace and Brandon from Blexit. They absolutely want to come back to Minnesota again, but they want a crowd. And so our job here today, after we're done, we're going to get you guys to sign up. They want to come and talk to you. They want to see you, and they want to do it before November 3rd. So come see us. I'll be off to the sides here. We'll be with some other Blexit representatives, and let's get signed up. Let's get Candace and Brandon back here. Yes. All right. So I want to start this way. I want to ask you a question, but I'm just going to have you answer it to yourself. Can you hear me? Yes. Woo-hoo! I can hear you. What brings us here today? What is it that truly unites us as Americans? I ask myself, how do I learn to embrace my Black heritage with my identity as an American? These are important questions that we must ask ourselves. The answer to these questions is even more important as we find ourselves being continuously thrust into the war of identity politics. How did you define your identity as an American? As a white American, as a Black American, as a Latino American, as a Native American, and so on? Or are we all just Americans? And what of patriotism? Is patriotism also segmented into identity groups, or is it all-encompassing? Does it even exist? And if so, who have we entrusted in teaching it? Who's responsible for teaching it? And who taught you? Let me start by taking a minute to discuss what it means to be a patriot. A patriot is described as a person who vigorously supports their country and is prepared to defend it against enemies and detractors.
That's right.
Let me say that again. A patriot is described as a person who vigorously supports their country and is prepared to defend it against enemies and detractors. Woo! So to be a patriot, you must first and foremost identify this as your country and be willing to defend it against enemies and detractors. So let's define detractors. A detractor is defined as a person who disparages someone or something. Does this sound familiar to you?
Yeah, there's some in the back there.
I don't need to give you an examples. You can simply close your eyes and you can imagine who our enemies are in this country. They're off to the right. They're on our TVs every single day. If I were to believe this media, I would have to believe that I have no place in this America. That not only is this country racist, but it's systemically racist. That after 8 years of a Black president, that somehow race relations have gotten worse. That a person of color, I can't possibly succeed or hope for a life that a white person is afforded due to the coined term of white privilege. That evidently, as a Black American, neither I or my children can hope to become a celebrity, a sports star, a chief of police, a fireman, a professor, a scientist, a mathematician, a neurosurgeon, an astrophysicist, a mayor, a Supreme Court justice, an entrepreneur, a commissioner, superintendent, secretary of state, billionaire, let alone president. Am I to believe that race relations have gotten worse since the civil rights movement? And if so, why weren't these things brought up during the 8 years of our black president? Or even better, solved?
Get him.
Exactly.
Get him.
I believe we're being media fed a lie. A lie that fits the emotions and fears of black America today and allows it to excuse its responsibility from family values, poverty, education, addiction, and criminal behavior. We as black Americans aren't truly taught how to love America. We aren't taught our history or our place in it. We're taught that we're outsiders, and more importantly, that we aren't white. That we should be in constant angst and anger, that we can't move forward without white guilt to carry us. But we're waking up. I, for one, am frustrated by the talk of wokeness. So this makes me think about my ancestors, and I wonder what the challenges were that they had with their own identities in the past. How did they walk away from decades of slavery and step into a free world? And I wondered that if they could do it then, why is it so hard for us now, over 200 years later? I would challenge us to look forward and not backwards, as so many of our ancestors and forefathers have done. Much like many of our ancestors, they decided to look forward and move forward. They were chained one day and freed the next, and yet they stepped forward with fear and uncertainty into a new world of hope and freedom. So we often talk about civil rights movement, and we revere their great names and stories. But what about our earliest black patriots? What about those first early patriots who lived and endured during the actual times of slavery? And maybe you can name a few, like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. But there were so many more voices, so many more lives, and they began much earlier. I can tell you this, that as a black American, and just an American, I am angry. I am frustrated. I'm angry at the lies that we're being fed. I'm angry at the lies that we're being fed, and the lies that we repeat, as if slavery is our only history, as if it's our only identity. But I have news for you, that though we've been slaves and started out that way, perhaps, we have also been patriots in this country. For we as black Americans have a deeper history than what's really talked about. We've been part of this nation's founding, and it's time we recognize it as the black patriots that we are. We have allowed those voices to be forgotten. During the American Revolution, the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, a soldier wrote from the battlefield, all over the place and wherever you looked, corpses lying about that had not been buried. The larger of them were blacks. That was the last major battle of the war, and the British surrender of America soon followed. Well, who were these brave men? Well, I'll tell you. These were black slaves and freemen who came to become black American patriots and fought for the independence of this country. During the Revolutionary War, approximately 9,000 black Americans became black patriots. They fought and died on the hopes and dreams of this nation, for the hope of what we could be, and in that, they planted the future seeds for abolition. Their efforts were important at the end of that Revolutionary War, in which 5 states would either abolish slavery or begin the steps to abolition. Those names were, just a few to name, Crispus Attucks, Salem Core, Peter Salem, and James Amistad Lafayette. So let me tell you about Phyllis Wheatley. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history here. Phyllis was born into slavery. Upon gaining her freedom, she would become a renowned poet. She wrote and published a book. She believed in the independence of this country, even penning a poem to our future first president, General George Washington, who later invited her to meet at his headquarters. And Phyllis's voice is saying, "Can you hear me?" And what about the Civil War? You know, the war that actually ended slavery. I think we can all agree that slavery was a despicable violation of basic civil rights. But did you know that 360,000 Northern men died in that war for abolition of slavery? Would you have given your life? That's probably easier to answer today than it would have been back then. And when people talk of reparations, do they put a value on those lives? Or do they even remember the war to end slavery at all? So unless you've seen the movie Glory with Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, a lot of people do not know that during the Civil War, 180,000 black men served as U.S. soldiers in the Army. About 90,000 of these men were former slaves from Confederate states. 40,000 black soldiers died in the war. 16 of those black patriots would earn the Congressional Medal of Honor. I'll name a few of those as well. Andre Caillou, Robert Smalls, William A. Jackson, William H. Carney, Aaron Anderson, James Daniel Gardner. I'll talk about Powhatan Beatty. Yes! They don't like to hear that over there. They just want to tell us that we were only slaves in this country, so we'll rebut that today. Powhatan Beatty, let me tell you about Powhatan. Powhatan was born a slave, and upon gaining his freedom, he joined the Union Army and was made a sergeant 2 days later. At the Battle of Sheffen's Farm in Newmarket Heights, he was awarded also the Congressional Medal of Honor. After the war, he became an actor and a public speaker. He would settle in Cincinnati, Ohio, help form the city's literary and drama club, and eventually becoming the organization's drama director. After the Civil War, some of these black Americans would move west with their newfound freedom. They would become explorers, soldiers, scouts, entrepreneurs, farmers, businessmen, businesswomen, and let's not forget, cowboys. From 1860 to 1880, an estimated 6,000 to 9,000 workers in the range cattle industry were black. I'll rephrase that. 25% of all cowboys were black. These black patriots helped settle and expand this great nation. Some of their names: Bose Eichert, Nate Love, Bill Pickett, James Beckworth, and Sarah Bickford. Bear with me, I got two more here. I got Rebecca Howard. Let me tell you about Rebecca. Rebecca was a former slave who became a restaurateur. She owned a hotel and a boarding house. She became extremely wealthy and generous, even supporting her orphan daughter of her former master. Can you imagine a woman who was a former slave, who becomes a wealthy entrepreneur, raises a family, and retires to a farm? She's accepted into her community and was highly regarded by everyone, including the governor, and even hosted President Rutherford B. Hayes at her hotel. And she accomplished all this within 15 years after the Civil War. And she's asking you, can you hear me? Last I have Beckworth. James Beckworth was a former slave as well, who would go on to become an explorer. He was a fur trader, a scout, an Indian leader, a storekeeper, a rancher, and an author. He would write the best-selling autobiography of his life entitled The Life and Adventures of James B. Beckworth, mountaineer, scout, pioneer, and chief of the Crow Nation.
Nice.
So I will close with these final words. These black patriots' voices are in all of us. They were more than slaves.
Woo!
They were Americans.
That's right.
Our lives were more than servitude. And what these Black patriots prove is that slavery wasn't our identity. That these patriots could rise above their shackles and become something enviable and great. These were only a few names. There are thousands more. Their voices beg to be heard. We owe it to them today to be more than our past. We owe it to them today to honor their memories. We owe it to them today to move forward. We owe it to them today to hold ourselves accountable. We owe it to them today to hold precious the freedom that we have been granted in this great nation. We owe it to them today to take on our role as true American patriots and keep their spirit alive. So how do we honor those of the past, those that have fallen and those who have been lost, and the heroes of this great land? Well, it's been said today several times. First, we honor the Constitution and the laws of this land. As Black Americans, we learn and teach the entire truth about our history in this country and take ownership of our place in it. To honor those who fought and died for our right to be free, we must become unabashed, flag-waving patriots. And as white Americans, stop apologizing for how you were born. I don't think any apologies are here. Does anybody want to apologize for being white today? No. I didn't think so. I didn't see any apologetics today.
Tell it.
Stop apologizing for how you were born and remove yourself from white guilt, if you have any. You shouldn't have any. You didn't participate in it. You have absolutely nothing to apologize for.
Amen.
As I look out into this crowd, I can boldly say to you today that we are not a racist society, and this is not a racist nation. I implore you to forge unapologetic patriotism, denounce victimhood, encourage personal responsibility, always show love and respect, salute our flag, pledge your allegiance, uphold these principles that make this country the greatest country on the face of the planet. And last but not least, remain watchful for every opportunity to stand as one nation